Today, I could just not stop thinking about the case of Malcolm Caldwell. He was a fiercely left-wing British university professor who would be killed in Cambodia at the hands of his own communist comrades. Yet what was puzzling is that by all accounts he was unwaveringly loyal to the Marxist ideology. So what could he have possibly done to trigger such a violent death? Well, this case runs deeper than many had actually realised. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Malcolm Caldwell lectured at the School of Oriental and African Studies, also known as SOAS, in London. To this day, this university remains infamous for its left-wing activism, but even so, Malcolm was different. While socially pleasant, Malcolm earned a reputation among faculty members for a uniquely unshakable Marxist view of the world. This was evident in his newspaper writings, where he vehemently praised the dystopian regime of the DPRK in North Korea, and also championed the Viet Cong in their battles against US forces during the Vietnam War. Malcolm Caldwell possessed a clear theoretical vision and adamantly resisted any challenges to it, refusing to read any literature that contradicted his Marxist worldview. Worst of all, when invited by the North Korean government to visit, he eagerly accepted their state propaganda as verified fact. As upon his return to England, Malcolm published articles in The Guardian applauding North Korea's spirit of self-reliance. Yet he glaringly omitted any mention of the ruthless political repression that plagues the country. As to Malcolm, the evidence he saw with his own eyes was actually irrelevant to his own ideological convictions. And this truly came to light regarding his resolute backing of the brutal Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the same regime that would ironically kill him. The Khmer Rouge was a brutal communist movement that seized control of Cambodia in 1975 and was led by this man, Pol Pot. Under his 4 years of terror, he oversaw what is now known as the Cambodian genocide, in which he and his party tried to radically transform Cambodia into a nation self-sustained on farming. This was carried out by evacuating the urban areas, forcing them into farm camps, and mass executing anyone perceived to not be the correct fit for this new class of peasant farmers. Being educated, middle class, or even something as little as wearing glasses would be enough for the Khmer Rouge to torture and execute you. In the end, they would murder 2 million of their own countrymen, which astoundingly was a quarter of the entire Cambodian population. But nonetheless, Malcolm Caldwell horrifyingly wrote support of this movement, as he dismissed mentions of these atrocities by responding, "Well, how many people died in the French Revolution?" So when in 1978 Malcolm got a letter of invitation from the Khmer Rouge, he was of course ecstatic. Malcolm was accompanied with 2 American journalists, Elizabeth Becker and Richard Dudman. Remember now, these 2 journalists will soon become critical to the story of Malcolm's murder. So anyways, during the first few days where they travelled the country under a heavily guided PR tour, Elizabeth was deeply aware of the Khmer Rouge's atrocities, and she is said to have argued endlessly with Malcolm, who remained unwilling to accept the grim reality. Malcolm's convictions bagged him a private audience with Pol Pot in the governor's palace in Phnom Penh. The details of their conversation remain sparse, but Malcolm believed it to be a pleasant discussion on communism's values in Cambodia, or so he thought. Malcolm Caldwell had returned to the hotel and happily ate dinner with the 2 journalists, where he tried one last time to change Elizabeth's mind about the Khmer Rouge before resigning to bed. Later that night, Elizabeth was woken by the sounds of dustbins. But then she realised there are no dustbins in this city, and what she actually heard was in fact gunfire. Elizabeth peered out of her door and saw a file of heavily armed men standing outside. One pointed a gun at her, so she quickly slammed the door and hid herself in her room. When her and Richard were allowed out of their rooms by their guides, she went and checked on Malcolm, and there she found him, lying on the floor, dead. So why was Malcolm murdered? Well, soon after the murder, 4 Cambodian security guards who were meant to be protecting Malcolm were arrested and taken to the infamous torture chamber, S21. Although obtaining a reliable answer to why Malcolm was killed proves difficult in such a setting, S21, often likened to the Auschwitz of the Cambodian genocide, was not a place concerned with the truth. Its only aim was to extract confessions that would align with Pol Pot's political agendas. So under unimaginable torture, the security guards had allegedly confessed to working for the CIA to prevent the Khmer Rouge from gathering global friends. However, Elizabeth Becker has struggled to believe these confessions and has given her following theory as to why Malcolm was murdered.
But if you're going to stand back and look at it, what makes the most sense is that there was a serious group of people in the top strata of the Khmer Rouge who did not want us to be there. There's a reason they never invited people. And if you were going to make sure no one ever comes again, maybe you kill the friend rather than these two journalists, because we go back and write the story. So if you're looking for a rational answer, that's the most rational I can come up with. You kill the friend and you have the two journalists go and write how dangerous it is.
So Malcolm Caldwell's murder may have just been an elaborate scheme by the top brass of the Khmer Rouge. Unfortunately, the four guards did not live to give their version of events to the public, as just 3 days after Malcolm's murder, they were found bayoneted to death after Vietnam had invaded and toppled the Khmer Rouge from power. But at the end of the day, Malcolm Caldwell's murder was caused by madness. The madness of a regime he openly admired and supported.